This is a serious and heavy topic. Some sound effects are used throughout. This is to keep the audience engaged. Katerina, that means you. Focus! Enjoy.
The Amazon rainforest covers 8 different countries in South America, including Bolivia. There's 59.6 million hectares of rainforest in Bolivia, which is only 6% of the Amazon rainforest. To best understand the causes of deforestation and degradation, it is important to know a bit about the history. Before the mid-90s, rubber and Brazil nuts used to be used as some of the main resources from the forest. With the fall of the usage of rubber and Brazil nuts, timber concessions, indigenous reserves, and communal land grew. Tenure instability, however, ensued, and logging grew in not yet designated protected areas. Before 2004, the Bolivian lowlands had 3.5 million hectares deforested, which is mostly for cattle ranching. Now, to examine the current causes of deforestation and forest degradation. One of the largest factors of deforestation is cattle ranching and farming in the lowlands. Not all of the land is viable for farming around the Amazon, so cattle is a main driver of deforestation. In the lowlands, however, agricultural is somewhat viable, and the production of soy has become abundant. On average, agriculture provides 3 times more net benefit for the landowner than a forest. In some places, it can be up to 10 times more profitable. However, in other parts of the country, this is not true, and the forest does have more profits, which is why it's only 3 times the net gain. This is a huge driver of deforestation. Protected areas have done a good job in some parts with reducing large-scale agriculture, but small-scale cattle ranching is still very prevalent. In protected areas, less than 2% deforestation occurs, but as we have learned in class, numbers are not always very clear, and recently there have been large problems with selective logging of mahogany in Bolivia. When we see some of the factors that prevent large-scale deforestation, the lack of finance for deforestation occurs. Now, let's take a look at where there is forest cover and what type of forest cover. So now, take a second to look at this map. You can see how the deforestation occurs greatly in this lowland area. However, there is still a lot of green on this map.
Read the chart.
Now, take a second to look at this chart. As you can see, the problem is not getting better. So, how does this impact the ecological, social, and economic situation in this area? When looking at the ecological impacts, we will look at human and nature-centered impacts. Obviously, there is an overlap, and this list is not all-encompassing. When we look at the ecological impacts that are human-centered, we see the lack of prevention of erosion. We struggle from flood control, there's very little water filtration, there's pollution, there are wildfires, and there are less renewable resources, including timber, medicine, and food. Also, we lose all of the carbon absorption. And when looking at the nature-centered ecological impacts, there's less room for nature to thrive, there's less biodiversity, there's a loss of species, there's obstructed waterways, pollution, change in nutrient cycles, and changes in climate. Now, just to share with you some of these very depressing photos, of these ecological impacts. Here's one of the photos of soil erosion in the rainforest. And here you can see a wildfire in Bolivia. From 2000 to 2018, Bolivia has experienced fires that has taken 27% of the Amazon in Bolivia, which is a ridiculous number, and those fires are still continuing today.
Amazon villages that cut down their forest may make a quick buck, but ultimately end up just as poor, both monetarily and ecologically, as they started out. A study of nearly 300 communities in the Bolivian Amazon shows that deforestation leads to social and economic boom and bust. The researchers in this study say the boom is probably due to a number of factors, including better roads and therefore better access to healthcare and schools. For a short while, the community benefits from the natural resources of the forest and makes money off the timber and the farms that are set up in the cleared lands. But the soil is rapidly degraded, making farming and cattle ranching unsustainable. A lot of that land ends up being abandoned. Deforestation cost studies have ignored the likelihood and possible economic impact of a large-scale forest dieback, therefore underestimating the true social cost of deforestation. Amazon countries, including that of Bolivia, have faced the risk of an unexpected forest to savanna transition, which will result in dramatic losses of ecosystem services and benefits. An economic analysis of 14 management alternatives in Bolivia's Amazon region revealed that unsustainable techniques are regularly more profitable. As a rule, sustainable forestry management, even when it can be highly profitable, simply cannot compete commercially with traditional, unsustainable methods. It is possible that this disadvantage with sustainable forestry will lessen in the future with the adoption of modern methods for the exploitation of wood resources and the incorporation of other environmental services in corporate decision-making systems. Without long-term sustainability will not be commercially competitive. Unless this difference can be reduced by increasing the profitability of sustainable management and reducing that of non-sustainable alternatives, the propensity to return to traditional industrial forms of forestry exploitation and management will persist. This underscores the need to be able to count on an effective system of incentives and strict enforcement of the law, especially for large industrial agriculturalists, usually foreign owned and operated. But is it even possible to analyze Bolivia economically solely based on the forestry regime? There are so many factors that come into play. During the period of reform, a series of extra sectoral events took place, such as the contraction of the Argentine economy, previously an important market for Bolivia, a devaluation in Brazil, which negatively affected Bolivian exports, and an economic crisis in Bolivia itself. These events create difficulties in identifying the impacts that are due exclusively to the new forestry regime. Certain problems would have probably resulted independently of the installment of the forestry regime, and therefore cannot be legitimately attributed to it. There is also a notable absence of economic studies concerning the impact of forestry reforms in Bolivia, despite the fact that it seems to be economic factors that determine the progress of reform and its future successes or failures. In terms of potential policy responses and their challenges, there are FSC certifications in the country. However, the usefulness of this is debatable. Some see it as an aid to forest governance, while others see it as costly and ineffective. International involvement has been going on to protect Bolivia's forests since 1987. There have been debt for nature swaps, and in 1997, Red Plus pilot programs. 1996, a forest concession system was created, with control being given to local governments. Long-term concessions were available with forest management plans, and fee for land area instead of the cut timber. Also, the local indigenous groups at the time were given official rights to the land, but this had some negative effects because it led to overlapping claims. In addition, the forest regime allowed for municipal forest reserves, many of which were in areas that removed the best logs for commercial timber species. Here, in the chart above, you can see the policies that can potentially affect deforestation rates. On the left, the effect on agricultural profitability, and on the right, the effect on forest profitability. The top two squares are positive attributes, and the bottom two negative. Please take a few moments to read through this chart. Do 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 do. You can see outlined here some very key components as to how policy interacts directly with Bolivia's environment in the Bolivian Amazon. Cecilia just needs a minute. Cecilia, you ready?
An idea to improve and lower deforestation and degradation in Bolivia is to further give community support for the protection of the forest and to work to find methods so that the forest can be seen as just as useful as agriculture.
Just as useful.
This can include providing forest management programs to small farmers.
Boom.
Thank you all so much for listening. Tell us your thoughts on deforestation and degradation of the Bolivian rainforest.
We want to know all those thoughts.
We hope you have a great day.
See ya.